What's up, everybody? Tom Pelissero here at Lucas Oil Stadium. Colts win today, 23-20 over the Vikings, who staged a rally after falling down 20-6. Missed a ton of opportunities, and this is exactly the sort of game that the Vikings, if they're going to maintain relevance to midseason, have to be able to win. They come in as 3-point favorites against the Colts, granted, on the road. It wasn't going to be easy, but the Colts were down to only one of their starting offensive linemen. They were missing Dwight Freeney. They have Andrew Luck coming off of a bit of a rocky performance, to say the least, with 3 interceptions against Chicago. And what happens today? They get no takeaways. They drive into the red zone a couple of times early, end up with field goals rather than touchdowns. They take 11 penalties for 100-some yards, several of them in pretty crucial situations, including that drive early in the second half where they get a roughing the punter called that. Did Andrew Sendejo actually hit the punter? I don't know. Pat McAfee sure is sold it. The Vikings coaches upstairs didn't think it was an infraction. Jared Allen hotly contested his personal foul for hitting Andrew Luck out of bounds, although from what I saw, yeah, it may be considered a ticky-tack call in terms of what actually happened on the play, but don't dive at the quarterback's legs at the sideline, usually going to be a good plan. They took a bunch of penalties. The offensive line, I believe, had 4 penalties. The defensive line jumped off sides 3 times. The things that you can't do in order to win the game, they didn't really have. They had one turnover that ended up being converted into points. Ponder almost threw another interception, but if you're not winning the takeaway-giveaway ratio, if you're not having that on your side, and it wasn't in this game, they didn't get any takeaways from the Colts, which after the way the Colts gave away the ball the previous week, you'd think the Vikings would have been able to do it. They give up some plays down the field. Antoine Winfield gets hit in a man coverage situation early on, ends up setting up the Colts' first touchdown. Reggie Wayne running against Tampa 2 coverage, gets in behind Aaron Henderson there. Perfect throw by Andrew Luck. I was really impressed with Andrew Luck overall because he was under duress. People were tweeting at me and saying the Vikings aren't getting any pressure. They were getting pressure. Go back and look at the tape and count how many times Andrew Luck actually threw from on his spot. He was moving. He was feeling the pressure. There were times he had guys hanging off him. Even the Reggie Wayne touchdown, he stood in and got his feet set just enough before Kevin Williams drilled him to get that ball off, and he put it on the spot up the seam. The Colts made more plays. That's the bottom line here. The Vikings offense, the issue with the Vikings offense, because the way it's constructed, is they don't have a lot of receivers who can beat man-to-man coverage. Percy Harvin is the one guy who's considered a matchup threat for opposing defensive coordinators, but with Harvin, he's not a really detailed route runner. He's probably going to do most of his damage with quick-hitting passes and manufactured touches, not the stuff that's down the field. So they have no one who can take the top off the defense. The Colts did sit back for a lot of the game and played cover 2 and weren't going to allow them to throw the football down the field. But at the same time, there were a lot of times where I looked where the Vikings would run a deep play action or something. And even if the protection held up, which the protection was more up and down than it was a week earlier as well, there was simply nobody open down the field. That's a product of having guys like Michael Jenkins and Devin Aromashadu, even Stephen Burton, who catches that wacky pass that was tipped a couple of times for his first NFL touchdown. He's not beating man coverage either. They have very limited weapons who are going to pose matchup threats to a defense. So they tried to hammer it out with the run, and look at Adrian Peterson's numbers. I haven't even looked at it, but 3.8 yards a carry, which isn't bad. Did some damage in the early going. That was another reason they tried to keep the ball on the ground. They did move the football. They end up with 327 yards offense, which isn't huge, but 7 of 15 on third downs isn't bad. They had more first downs, more yardage than the Colts. The penalties were killers. The missed opportunities were killers. And once again, when they needed to be able to stop the pass, both early in the game and then late in the game on that final drive. Think about it. Think of the chunk yardage gains that Andrew Luck had to get in order to drive them down into field goal range. 20 yards to Reggie Wayne on consecutive plays. One of them, off the top of my head, I think one of them they were sitting in cover 2 and Wayne came free in the zone. The other time they brought pressure, it was a man situation. He comes open against Josh Robinson. That's a tough matchup. You still look at that secondary. They still have a long way to go. Certainly, they should be better than they were a year ago, but you've seen some of the same sorts of things you saw the first 4 games of last season, where there ended up being, on some level, a mutiny against the play calling because they were being stuck in man situations, high leverage spots, and guys were getting burned. It's been the same sort of a thing. It's great if you can mix up the coverages, but we saw today several different coverages got beat for big plays by Andrew Luck and by that Colts offense. It's not going to get any easier next week in San Francisco either. The Vikings have made real clear, all right, after they got the first one, they had to get to 2-0 because they know the stretch they're coming into playing against San Francisco, then at Detroit. 2 pretty tough games, at least on paper. Looking at the way the 49ers played last week against the Packers, and then looking at where the Vikings are right now, that game has the potential, even though San Francisco isn't necessarily built to score a ton of points, that game has the potential to be a blowout. Now, if the Vikings put things together, and if they're able to be efficient offensively, then they'll have a chance. But when you have an offense that's not built for the big play, it's more built for the small incremental gains, stay on schedule, run the ball well on first down, hit the short and intermediate passing game, it's tough because one mistake, one penalty, one dropped ball, whatever it is, that can end up costing you because you just you're not equipped to be able to make that up. That's going to be even of a bigger difficulty for the Vikings once they start facing some better teams here. They lost to a Colts team that was the worst team in the NFL last season. Certainly a remolded unit. Reggie Wayne seems to have found the fountain of youth, at least to an extent. Andrew Luck played his ass off in this game. But that defense for the Colts managed to, in a bunch of situations, stand up against that Vikings offense. That's got to be fixed, and something's got to be done to try to cut down on the amount of yards they're able to get down the field. And the defensive line, when they've got the opportunities, they've got to close out those sacks, as good as Andrew Luck was today at avoiding them. I am flying back to the Twin Cities in the morning. Full Vikings coverage is always at 1500ESPN.com. We will see you.